Rain pounded on the windows of the Peoria Police Department as Jessica Haynes crossed the threshold of the building on South Adams Street on Thursday morning, March 15th. She clutched a wet umbrella and a small purse in her hands, and her usually neatly styled brown hair was messy. The 28-year-old woman looked anxious but not confused, more like someone who was trying to cope with the situation, but was beginning to realize that it might be more serious than it initially appeared. "I need to file a missing person report," she said to the sergeant on duty, Carlos Mendez, whose massive silhouette towered over the reception desk. "It's my mother. I haven't seen her in 3 days." Sergeant Mendez looked up from his computer, quickly assessing the visitor. Jessica was dressed in a simple blue blouse and dark jeans, the work clothes of a manager at Office Plus, a stationery store in the North Side shopping center. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive, a typical middle-class Peoria resident. "How long has she been missing?" Mendez asked, pulling out a standard form. "Since Monday evening. I thought maybe she was just..." Jessica paused, as if searching for the right words. "We have our disagreements sometimes. But she always lets me know if she's planning to stay out overnight. This isn't like her." Mendez nodded and pointed to a row of plastic chairs against the wall. "Have a seat. I'll call the detective who will be handling your case." While Jessica waited, she nervously fiddled with the strap of her purse and glanced at the wall clock. The building was bustling with the usual morning activity. Uniformed police officers walked by with folders and coffee, phones rang, and computer keyboards clicked. Peoria was a large enough city that the police station was never empty. 15 minutes later, a man in his mid-30s wearing a dark blue suit approached her. Tom Riley looked tired, the kind of tiredness that comes from years of dealing with human tragedy. His light brown eyes were attentive, but they also showed the caution of an experienced detective who knew that first impressions could be deceiving. "Miss Haynes? Detective Riley, let's go to my office and you can tell me everything in detail." Riley's office was on the second floor and was a typical police workplace. A metal desk, 2 chairs, lots of folders, and several diplomas and certificates on the walls. On the desk was a photo of a girl about 10 years old, his daughter Emily, whom he had only seen on weekends since his divorce 2 years ago. "Tell me about your mother," Riley began, taking out a notebook. "Full name, age, where she works." "Amelia Haynes, she's 52. She works as a cashier at Walmart on Void Road. We live together at 1247 Maple Street." Jessica spoke clearly, like someone who had thought through what she was going to say in advance. "She usually comes home around 6:30, but she wasn't there on Monday." "When was the last time you saw her?" "On Monday morning before work, around 8 o'clock. She was..." Jessica paused. "We had a little argument about the bills. Nothing serious, just the usual domestic disagreements. She left for work, and I didn't see her again." Riley took notes, glancing up at Jessica from time to time. Something about her manner of speaking caught his attention. She was too composed for someone who was genuinely worried about a missing loved one. "Have you contacted her work?" "Yes, of course. I called her manager yesterday morning. He said my mom hadn't been to work since Tuesday. She said she was sick, but didn't specify what was wrong." "Have you contacted any hospitals?" "I called all the hospitals in Peoria and the surrounding area. No one with that name has been admitted." Riley nodded. Standard actions for a concerned relative, but again, too methodical for someone in a panic. "Tell me about Emily. What is she like? Does she have any habits that could explain her absence?" Jessica hesitated for a few seconds. "She can be impulsive sometimes. She makes spontaneous decisions, but she always tells me. We have a close relationship, despite occasional disagreements." "What kind of disagreements?" "The usual family problems. Money, household chores. Mom sometimes spends more than she should, and I'm more careful with finances." Jessica shrugged. "We both work, but we still have to watch our spending." "I see. What about friends? Are there people she might have stayed with?" "Her best friend is Maria Sanchez. She works as a waitress at Mel's Diner on Glen Avenue. I already called her, but Maria said she hasn't seen my mom in several days. Riley wrote down Maria's name. What about a boyfriend? Any romantic relationships? Jessica shook her head. Not recently. After she divorced my father 10 years ago, she dated a few men, but nothing serious. Now she's focused on her work and family. Your father, where does he live? In Chicago. They haven't spoken since they divorced. He has a new family. Riley spent the next 20 minutes finding out details about Amelie's daily life, her roots, habits, health. Jessica answered all his questions, but each answer seemed a little too rehearsed. Tell me more about Monday, the detective asked. From the morning. We got up as usual, around 6:30. We had breakfast. I noticed some unpaid bills on the table for electricity and internet. I asked my mom when she planned to pay them. She got upset. She said I was too controlling. We argued a little, but nothing dramatic. And after that, I left for work first, around 7:30. My mother was still finishing her breakfast. She said she would leave in half an hour. And in the evening, I came home around 6. I waited for her until 7:30, then tried to call her. The phone went straight to voicemail. Riley looked up. Did she take her phone with her? Always. An old iPhone I gave her for her last birthday. Can we track its location? I tried Find My Phone, but it's not responding. It must be turned off or out of battery. After the formal interview was over, Riley walked Jessica back to the reception area. What happens next? She asked. I'll start the investigation today. I'll talk to her neighbors, co-workers, and friend. We'll check hospitals and other places. We'll also request surveillance camera footage from your neighborhood and along her route to work. What if? Miss Haynes, Riley interrupted, in most cases, missing persons are found within a few days. Often the explanation is simple. Try not to worry prematurely. But even as he said this, the detective was not entirely sure. Something about Jessica's behavior alarmed his professional intuition. After she left, Riley called Walmart on Void Road and asked to speak to the manager. Mike Collins, the shift manager, confirmed Jessica's words. Amelie didn't come in on Tuesday, he said. She called early in the morning and said she wasn't feeling well. I wasn't surprised. She had seemed stressed lately. Stressed in what way? Distracted. She made several mistakes counting change. She's usually very attentive. Last week she even asked for an advance, which wasn't like her. This was the first piece of information that didn't match Jessica's story about a stable family situation. The next call was to Mel's Diner. Maria Sanchez was just finishing her day shift. Detective? Her voice immediately filled with concern. Is this about Amelie? Jessica called me yesterday, but I thought, what did you think? That they had another fight. It's happened before. Amelie sometimes goes to her sister's in Bloomington for a few days when she needs to cool off. Amelie has a sister in Bloomington? Yes, Carol. They're not very close, but sometimes Riley wrote down another name. Jessica hadn't mentioned her aunt. When was the last time you saw Amelie? Sunday. She stopped by the diner after work. We chatted a bit. She seemed troubled. Troubled about what? I'm not sure. Something about money and plans for the future. She said she had a difficult decision to make. After talking to Maria, Riley felt that the case might be more complicated than it initially appeared. There were too many inconsistencies in Jessica's story. He decided to start with the house on Maple Street. The small, one-story house built in the 1960s was located in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood. The neighbors were home. Most people in Peoria worked standard hours. Darrell Harris, the neighbor on the left, turned out to be a middle-aged man with the calloused hands of a builder. He was standing by his pickup truck unloading tools. Amelie? He frowned when he heard the detective's question. Yes, I know her. She's a good woman. What happened? She's missing. Her daughter filed a report. Darrell set the toolbox on the ground. Missing? That's strange. I saw her, let me think. on Sunday evening. She was taking out the trash. What did she look like? Normal. We said hello. Although now that you mention it, she seemed a little distracted, not as talkative as usual. Did you see anything on Monday or Tuesday? On Monday morning, I saw them both leaving for work, as usual. But on Tuesday, he paused. On Tuesday evening, I saw Jessica come home, but it was late, around 10. It seemed strange. Does she usually come home at a different time? Usually around 6, but that evening it was late and she looked agitated. She quickly went into the house. Riley felt his suspicion grow. Jessica said that Tuesday had been a normal day, that she had been waiting for her mother at home. He knocked on the Haynes' door. Jessica opened the door, still in her work clothes. "Detective? Have you found anything? Can I come in? I want to look around the house, maybe find something that will help us figure out where your mother might be." The house was clean but not immaculately tidy. It was a typical working family home. A few dishes in the sink, mail on the kitchen table, a pair of shoes by the front door. Nothing suspicious. "Show me your mother's room," Riley asked. Everything in Amelie's bedroom looked normal. The bed was made, clothes hung in the closet, but the dressing table caught the detective's attention. It was covered with jewelry that a woman would not normally leave behind when going on a trip. "Did your mother take any things with her? Clothes? Cosmetics?" Jessica looked around the room. "It doesn't seem like it." That's what's strange. If she was planning to go somewhere, she would have at least taken a bag with the essentials. It was logical. But Riley noticed that Jessica had looked around the room too quickly, as if she already knew what was there and what wasn't. In the evening, the detective returned to the office and began writing his first report on the case. So far, he had more questions than answers, but a pattern was beginning to emerge. Jessica was hiding something important, and that something was connected to her mother's disappearance. Friday began with a thick fog that enveloped Peoria, as if the city was trying to hide its secrets. Detective Riley arrived at Mel's Diner on Glen Avenue at exactly 8 in the morning, knowing that Maria Sanchez was starting her morning shift. The establishment was a typical American diner: red vinyl booths, chrome stools at the counter, and the smell of coffee mixed with the aroma of fried bacon. Maria was wiping down tables, preparing for the rush of customers. A 40-year-old woman with tired eyes and hands covered in small scars from years of working in the kitchen. She looked like someone who had seen enough of life's difficulties not to be surprised by new problems. "Are you the detective who called yesterday?" she asked, without stopping what she was doing. "Have a seat, order some coffee. It's better to talk before the crowd comes in." Riley settled into a corner booth and ordered a black coffee. "Tell me about Amelie. How has she been lately?" Maria sat down across from him, clutching a towel tightly in her hands. Distressed, very anxious. The last 2 months she hasn't been herself. We used to chat for hours about all kinds of nonsense. Work, neighbors, TV shows. But lately she would come in, order coffee, and sit silently, as if thinking about something. Did she talk about what was bothering her? Maria hesitated, glancing at the door. "It's complicated. Amelie asked me not to tell anyone, but if she really is missing, is she safe? I don't know." Maria leaned closer and lowered her voice. Amelie had debt problems. Big problems. Riley perked up. "What kind of debt?" "She gambled. At riverboat casinos, in underground poker games downtown. It started after the divorce as a way to have fun, but it gradually turned into an addiction. She said she owed about $30,000 to various people." $30,000. For a supermarket cashier, that was a huge amount. Did Jessica know about it? Amelie said no. She tried very hard to hide it from her daughter. She was afraid of disappointing her. Maria shook her head. "But I think Jessica suspected something. Amelie mentioned that her daughter had started asking too many questions about money. And on Sunday, when you last spoke, what did she say about a difficult decision?" "She was given an ultimatum." The people she owes money to gave her until the end of the week to pay at least half of the amount. Or Maria didn't finish her sentence. Or what? They threatened to go to Jessica, tell her everything, and demand that the family sell the house to pay off the debt. Riley felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. And what did Amelie plan to do? She talked about two options. Either tell Jessica the truth and ask for help selling the house, or Maria hesitated. Or what? Or disappear. Leave town, start a new life somewhere else. She said she couldn't bear the thought of ruining her daughter's future. After talking to Maria, Riley drove back to Maple Street. He needed to talk to Daryl Harris in more detail. The builder was working in the yard, repairing the porch. "Detective," Daryl put down his hammer when he saw the police officer approaching. "Any news about Amelie?" "I wanted to clarify a few details. You said you saw Jessica coming home late on Tuesday. Are you sure about the time?" "Absolutely. I was watching the news at 10 o'clock when I heard the sound of a car. I looked out the window and saw her Honda Civic in the driveway. She went into the house very quickly without even looking around as she usually did." "What's usual?" "Well, she was always polite. She would wave if she saw me in the yard. But that evening, it was as if she was rushing to hide." "Tell me about the relationship between Amelie and Jessica." Daryl scratched his chin. "It's hard to say. Outwardly, they seemed close, but sometimes you could hear them arguing, especially in recent months. Usually late at night when they thought the neighbors were asleep." "What were they arguing about?" "It's hard to make out the words, but Jessica's tone sounded very controlling. Amelie seemed defensive, as if her daughter was demanding something from her and she couldn't or wouldn't give it to her." "Did you notice anything else strange?" Daryl hesitated. "This may sound silly, but about a month ago I saw some men driving up to the house. They weren't from around here. Expensive car, suits. They talked to Amelie on the porch for about 10 minutes, then left. She looked scared." "Can you describe them?" "One was tall, about 40, with dark hair. The other was shorter but stocky. Both looked like, people you wouldn't want to mess with." This confirmed Maria's story about debts and threats. In the evening, Riley returned to the Haynes house. Jessica was home, cooking dinner in the kitchen. She looked more tense than the day before. "Any news?" she asked, without looking up from the frying pan. "A few questions," Riley replied, sitting down at the kitchen table. "You didn't mention that your mother has a sister in Bloomington." Jessica froze for a second, then continued stirring the food. "Aunt Carol?" "They don't talk. They haven't seen each other in years, but your mother sometimes went to see her when she was upset." "How did you know that?" "Maria Sanchez mentioned it. Why didn't you tell me about this right away?" "Because I knew Mom didn't go to Carol's. They had a falling out over Grandma's inheritance. Mom would never go to her for help." "Okay. What about Tuesday night? You said you were at home waiting for your mother, but a neighbor saw you arrive around 10 p.m. Jessica's face turned pale. "I was at a friend's house. I didn't want to sit at home alone, worrying. I went to Sarah's. She lives on the north side. We work together." "Why didn't you mention that right away?" "It didn't seem important. I thought you would focus on finding my mother, not checking every little detail of my life." Riley wrote down Sarah's name. "I need her full address and phone number to check." Jessica dictated the information, but her hands were shaking slightly. "One more question. Maria said your mother had a gambling problem and had accumulated large debts. Did you know about this?" Jessica's expression changed dramatically. "What? What debts?" "Maria is mistaken. She says Amelie owes about $30,000 to various people, that she was threatened." "That's impossible." "Mom doesn't gamble. She never has. Maria is confusing something, or..." Jessica paused as if thinking about something. "Maybe Mom didn't tell me everything but $30,000 in debt? I would have noticed." "How exactly would you have noticed?" "We live in the same house. I see the mail, the bills. If there were money problems like that, I would know. But Riley remembered the Walmart manager's words about Amelie asking for an advance, and the arguments about unpaid bills that Jessica herself had mentioned. Miss Haynes, I have to ask you directly. Have you told me the whole truth about your mother's disappearance? Jessica met his gaze. Of course. Why would I lie? I don't know. But so far, every person I've spoken to has told me something new about your mother or you. It makes me think you're hiding important information. I'm telling the truth, detective. My mother is missing, and I want you to find her, not waste time questioning me. After leaving Jessica, Riley contacted Sarah Collins, Jessica's colleague. The woman confirmed that Jessica had indeed come to see her on Tuesday evening, but the time did not match. She arrived around 8:30 and left around 10, Sarah said on the phone. She was very nervous, looking at her watch all the time. She said she was worried about her mother, but I thought there was something else going on. What exactly? I don't know. She asked strange questions about how long the police usually search for missing people before declaring them dead, and she asked if it was possible to sell a house if the owner was missing. These questions made Riley seriously question Jessica's motives. There were too many coincidences: her mother's debts, threats to sell the house, her daughter's strange behavior, and her lies about minor details. Late at night, the detective sat in his office studying the information he had gathered. He drew a diagram of the relationships on the board. Amelie in the center, surrounded by Jessica, Maria, Daryl, and unknown creditors. So far, Jessica was the only person whose behavior aroused suspicion. But Riley knew that suspicion was not proof. He needed to find more facts before making any accusations. Most importantly, he still needed to find Amelie Haynes. Saturday brought the first clear weather in a week. Detective Riley arrived at First National Bank on Main Street with a warrant to obtain the Haynes family's financial records. Melissa Thornton, the bank manager, met him in her office with a folder of documents and a concerned expression on her face. Detective, I have to say that Mrs. Haynes's account has been a concern for us in recent months, she said, opening the folder. She was usually very careful with her finances, but lately, Riley studied the bank statements. The picture was grim. Starting in October of last year, Amelie had begun withdrawing large sums of cash, $500 to $1,000 several times a week. In February, she took out a $15,000 home equity loan, which was spent within a month. These cash withdrawals, Riley pointed to the records, did they follow a pattern? Mostly on weekends, Melissa replied, and often in the area of the Grand Victoria Casino in Elgin. We have ATMs there, and the house? What is its market value? According to the latest appraisal, about $85,000. After deducting the mortgage and home equity loan, the net value is approximately $45,000. Enough to cover the $30,000 in debt. Yes, but there's a problem. Melissa showed another document. 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Haynes applied for another home equity loan. We denied her because the debt-to-value ratio was already too high. Did she mention why she needed the money? She said she wanted to help her daughter with her education. But when we asked for documents from the college, she couldn't provide them. Riley looked at the latest account activity. On Monday, the day Amelie disappeared, there were no transactions. But on Tuesday, when Jessica claimed she was looking for her mother, someone withdrew $300 from an ATM downtown at 2:30 p.m. Do you have the security camera footage from that ATM? Yes, we can provide them. The next stop was Hartley Associates Real Estate Agency on Knox Avenue. Susan Hartley, the agency's owner, was a woman in her 50s with a professional smile and attentive eyes. Amelie Haynes? She frowned when she heard the name. Yes, she came to see me 2 weeks ago. She wanted to know how much her house on Maple Street might be worth. Did she say why she wanted to sell? She said her family needed money for urgent expenses. She seemed very stressed. I did a preliminary appraisal and told her that with a quick sale, we could get about $80,000. Did she mention a daughter? That's an interesting question, Susan said, putting the documents aside. She specifically asked not to tell Jessica about the visit yet. She said she wanted to think everything over first before discussing it with her family. And what did you say to her? I explained that the consent of all owners is required to sell the house. The house is registered to 2 people, Emily and Jessica. Without her daughter's signature, it cannot be sold. This was new information. Jessica was a co-owner of the house and knew about it. That meant Amelie couldn't sell the property without her consent. How did Amelie react to this information? She was very upset. She said she didn't remember that. Apparently, the house had been re-registered a few years ago, and she had forgotten the details. That evening, Riley decided to visit Jessica again. He needed answers to the questions that had been building up. He found her at home, watching TV in the living room. When she saw the detective, her face immediately tensed. You again? Any news about my mom? I have some questions for you. Riley sat down in the chair opposite her. Did you know your mother had serious debts? We've already discussed this. Maria is mistaken. I checked the bank records. Over the past 4 months, your mother has withdrawn more than $20,000 in cash, mostly at casinos. She also took out a $15,000 home equity loan. Jessica's face paled. That's impossible. I would have known. How would you know? You said she had been secretive lately. But $20,000? Where did she get it? We don't have that kind of money. Exactly. That's why she used the house as collateral. Riley watched Jessica's reaction. By the way, did you know you're a co-owner of the house? Jessica froze. What? The house is registered to both of you. Your mother couldn't sell it without your consent. But she tried to do so. Sell the house? Why? To cover her debts. She went to a realtor 2 weeks ago. Jessica stood up and began pacing the room. I don't understand. Why didn't she tell me? We could have worked something out. Perhaps because she knew you wouldn't agree. Of course I wouldn't agree. It's our house, my house. Where would we live? Where is your mother now, Miss Haynes? The question hung in the air. Jessica stopped and slowly turned to face the detective. What do you mean? I mean that your mother disappeared at the very moment she had to make a decision about the house. The creditors gave her until the end of the week. It's Friday. Tomorrow is the deadline. Do you think I did something to her? I think you know more than you're saying. Jessica sat back down, folding her hands in her lap. Okay. Yes, we argued about money, more than I told you. But I didn't know about the debts and the gambling. What did you argue about? She became strange. Nervous. She constantly checked her email before me, answered calls in a whisper, left the house at unusual hours. And when I asked what was going on, she got angry and said I was too controlling. And what did you think? Honestly, I thought she was having an affair, that she was seeing someone and was embarrassed to tell me. Jessica smiled bitterly. It turns out it was much worse than that. Tell me about Monday. The real version, not the one you told me before. Jessica sighed. She got a phone call in the morning. She was talking very quietly, but I heard her say, I need more time, and my daughter doesn't know anything. After the call, she was on edge. What happened next? I asked about the bills on the table. She exploded. She said she was tired of my questions and that she had a right to privacy. We argued more than usual. What exactly did you argue about? I said that if we had financial problems, we should solve them together. That I could take on extra work, or we could ask our relatives for help. And she said, Jessica paused. What did she say? That some problems can't be solved by simple means, and that sometimes people have to make difficult choices to protect those they love. These words echoed Maria's words about a difficult decision. And after that, you went to work? Yes. I slammed the door. The last thing I said to her was, when you decide to trust me, let me know. Jessica's voice trembled. That was the last thing I said to her. And in the evening? I came home at 6. She wasn't there. I waited until 8, then went to Sarah's. Yes, I lied to you about the time, but only because I didn't want to explain why I ran away from my problems instead of dealing with them. Riley studied Jessica's face. Either she was a very good actress, or she was telling the truth. But one thing still bothered him. On Tuesday, someone withdrew $300 from your mother's bank account. At 2:30 in the afternoon, it couldn't have been Mom. She was at work. Exactly. Who else could have known her PIN? Jessica was silent for a few seconds. I knew. She gave me the code a year ago when she was in the hospital with the flu and asked me to pay her bills. And where were you on Tuesday at 2:30 p.m.? At work. I have an alibi. I'll need to check that. Of course. Check whatever you want. Jessica stood up. But instead of suspecting me, maybe you should find the people who threatened my mother. We're working on it. But so far, you're the only person who's lied to me from the beginning. After leaving Jessica, Riley drove to the office and studied the ATM camera footage. The quality was not ideal, but the figure at the ATM on Tuesday was about the same height and build as Jessica. The face was hidden by a hood, but the movements seemed feminine. Sunday was spent trying to find Amelie's creditors. Riley contacted the security department at the Grand Victoria Casino, where Amelie often gambled. Security manager Rick Parker agreed to meet on Monday. Amelie Haynes? Parker looked through the records. Yes, she was a regular customer. She played mostly blackjack and poker. In recent months, she had been losing more than usual. Did she interact with other players? Sometimes. But in recent weeks, she had been avoiding certain people. We noticed that she was trying not to cross paths with some of our, let's say, less official customers. People who lend money? We don't encourage that kind of activity on our premises, but we can't control it completely. Parker lowered his voice. There are a few people who specialize in lending money to players. Not the most pleasant people. Can you give me their names? Officially, no. Unofficially, look for Vince Marconi and his partner Joe Coletti. They are often here on weekends. Monday brought new information. Riley found Vince Marconi at the Lucky Strike bar in downtown Peoria. The 45-year-old man with gold teeth and an expensive suit made no secret of his profession. Amelie Haynes? Vince smirked. Of course I know her. She's a good woman, but a bad player. She owes me $18,000. And what did you plan to do to get your money back? Nothing bad. We agreed that she would sell the house and pay off the debt. She gave her word by the end of the week. And if she doesn't sell, then we'll deal with her daughter. The house is in both their names, so her daughter is also responsible. Did you threaten Amelie? Why would I threaten her? I have lawyers. Everything is above board. Vince took a sip from his glass. To be honest, I'm surprised she disappeared. It's not like her. When was the last time you saw her? On Sunday. She came to the casino and said she needed more time. I gave her until Friday. The deadline expired 2 days ago. On Monday evening, Riley was back in his office, studying all the facts he had gathered. The picture was becoming clearer, but no less disturbing. Amelie was in a desperate situation. Large debts, pressure from creditors, inability to sell the house without her daughter's consent. And Jessica lied about little things and had a motive to protect the house she considered her own. But the most disturbing fact was that it had been 5 days since Amelie's disappearance, and there was no trace of her anywhere. No credit card use, no video recordings, no witnesses. It was as if she had simply vanished from the face of the earth, or someone had hidden her body very well. A phone call at 5 a.m. on Tuesday, March 22nd, broke the silence in Detective Riley's bedroom. Sergeant Mendez delivered the terrible news. A body had been found at 1247 Maple Street. Jessica Haynes had called the police 20 minutes earlier after discovering her mother in the basement of the house. Riley got dressed in 3 minutes and sped through the empty morning streets of Peoria. Maple Street was blocked by police cars, their red and blue lights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Neighbors peered out of their windows. Several people stood on the sidewalk in bathrobes and jackets thrown over their pajamas. Jessica sat in the patrol car, wrapped in a blanket. Even from a distance, it was clear she was in shock. Her face was white as chalk, her hands were shaking, and her gaze was fixed on nothing in particular. Sergeant Mendez provided the details. The call came in at 4:37 a.m. The first patrol arrived 7 minutes later and confirmed the death. Jessica explained that she couldn't sleep and decided to look in the basement for her mother's old financial documents, thinking she might find something that would help her understand Amelie's disappearance. At the entrance, the detective was met by the coroner, Dr. Harris, an elderly man with 30 years of experience. His preliminary conclusion was grim: a woman of about 50, dead for at least 3 days, possibly longer. The preliminary cause of death was head trauma from a blunt object. The injury was too severe to be the result of an accidental fall. Going down to the basement, Riley found Amelie Haynes's body near the far wall, next to the washing machine. She was wearing the same clothes Jessica had described on Monday, dark jeans and a blue blouse. Next to the body lay a broken baseball bat, an old wooden bat with dark stains on the thick end. Forensic scientist Dan Coleman confirmed that the bat looked like the murder weapon. The dark stains were definitely blood, although laboratory analysis was needed for a definitive conclusion. The fingerprints on the rough surface of the old bat were smudged and unclear. A detailed examination of the basement revealed no signs of a struggle or other traces of violence. It became clear that Amelie had been killed elsewhere, and her body had been moved to the basement. Coleman estimated that it would take an adult of average build 5 to 10 minutes to carefully carry the body from the first floor. On the first floor, forensic investigator Sarah Washington found signs of thorough cleaning in the kitchen. The floor area near the kitchen table was much brighter than the rest of the surface, indicating intensive cleaning. No blood was visible, but a luminol test was planned to detect hidden traces. In Amelie's bedroom, a cell phone lay on the dressing table next to her cosmetics, the same one that, according to Jessica, had been unavailable since Monday. The battery was completely dead. Considering that a 3-year-old iPhone usually holds a charge for 2 to 3 days with normal use, the phone must have been in the bedroom since Monday or Tuesday. After completing the initial examination of the crime scene, Riley questioned Jessica. The young woman was still in shock, but was gradually coming to her senses. She explained that she had not slept all night, thinking about her mother's debts and the situation with the house, and had decided to look for documents that might clarify the situation. Going down to the basement at 4 in the morning, she turned on the light and saw her mother near the washing machine. At first, she thought Amelie had fallen, but then she noticed the blood and the bat nearby. Jessica confirmed that the baseball bat belonged to the family. It was left behind by her brother, who died of leukemia at the age of 12. She claimed that she had not been down to the basement in the last week and had last been there about a month ago when she was washing winter clothes. When asked directly about her whereabouts on Monday and Tuesday evenings, Jessica repeated her previous testimony. On Monday, she was at home waiting for her mother. On Tuesday, she worked until 5, then went to her friend Sarah's house. When Riley reminded her that this was now a murder investigation and she needed an alibi, Jessica's face paled even more. She categorically denied the possibility of murdering her own mother, claiming that she loved her despite all their problems. After the interrogation, Riley sent Jessica to a hotel, as the house had been sealed off as a crime scene. Returning to the station, he began a detailed check of the suspect's alibi. A call to Office Plus confirmed Jessica's testimony. Manager Bob Miller reported that she had worked until 5:30 p.m. on Monday and until 5 p.m. on Tuesday, noting her punctuality and lack of any unusual behavior on those days. However, this did not rule out the possibility of a murder late on Monday evening or in the following days. Sarah Collins, Jessica's friend, confirmed that she arrived at her house on Tuesday at around 8:30 p.m. in a very agitated state. They talked until 9:30, mainly about her missing mother. But Sarah noted Jessica's strange questions about inheritance. She was interested in what happens to property when someone dies without a will and asked about the possibility of selling the deceased's house to cover debts. On Tuesday evening, the results of the luminol test came in. Sarah Washington reported the discovery of a significant amount of blood near the kitchen table. Despite thorough cleaning, traces remained and were sufficient for DNA analysis. The results were due in 2 days. As for the fingerprints on the bat, several smudged prints were found. One could have belonged to the victim, but the quality of the other set was too poor for a reliable comparison. Riley spent the rest of the evening reconstructing the chronology of events. According to his reconstruction, Amelie was killed on Monday evening in the kitchen, after which the body was moved to the basement. The killer carefully cleaned up the blood, but did not consider the possibility of it being detected by special methods. Wednesday brought important autopsy results. Dr. Harris determined the time of death to be between 7 p.m. on Monday and 2 a.m. on Tuesday. The cause of death was extensive traumatic brain injury from a single powerful blow to the back of the head with a blunt object. Delivering such a blow required considerable but not extraordinary strength. An adult of average build could have done it, especially in a state of emotional distress. The absence of defensive wounds indicated that the victim did not expect the attack and trusted her killer. On Wednesday afternoon, Riley questioned Daryl Harris, a neighbor. Harris recalled hearing loud female voices coming from the Haynes' house around 9 p.m. on Monday. Both women, Jessica and Amelie, were arguing. After 9, it got quiet, and on Tuesday morning, Jessica left for work as usual, around 7:30. Vince Marconi, Amelie's creditor, reported his alibi from Monday night. He was at the casino until midnight with a bunch of witnesses. His partner, Joe Coletti, was also there and played poker until closing time. By Thursday, the picture was clearer. Riley had the murder scene, the time of death, and the murder weapon. All the evidence pointed in one direction. Jessica had a motive in the form of inheritance and protection of the house, an opportunity as a resident of the house, and her behavior from the very beginning aroused suspicion. Lies about her alibi, strange questions about the inheritance, knowledge of her mother's PIN code, it all fit together. Friday brought the results of the DNA analysis. Sarah Washington confirmed that the blood in the kitchen belonged to Amelie Haynes. In addition, hair that did not belong to her was found on the victim's body. The samples were sent for analysis, with results expected the next day. Riley sat in his office, studying a board with photos of the crime scene and a diagram of connections. In the center was a photo of Amelie Haynes, surrounded by all the people in her life. But only one person had both the motive and the opportunity to commit the crime. The detective knew he was close to solving the case. All the evidence was coming together, and all that was needed was final confirmation to press charges. Saturday, March 26th, began with a phone call from the lab. The results of the analysis of the hair found on Amelie Haynes' body finally put an end to the investigation. The hair belonged to Jessica Haynes, a fact that turned Detective Riley's suspicions into irrefutable evidence. Sitting in his office with a cup of cold coffee, Riley studied the final report of the examination. The DNA of the hair matched Jessica's sample 99.97%. This meant that the daughter was in close proximity to her mother at the time of or immediately after the murder. Considering all the other evidence, there were no alternative explanations. The detective compiled a chronology of Amelie Haynes' last days. On Sunday, she met with Maria at a diner, looking distraught and talking about a difficult decision. That same day, she met with her creditor, Vince Marconi, at the casino, who gave her a final deadline of Friday. On Monday morning, she received a phone call, probably another reminder about the debt. This was followed by an argument with her daughter, which was the last conflict in their relationship. On Saturday morning, Riley summoned Jessica to the office for a final interrogation. The young woman looked exhausted. Several days in a hotel, the stress of discovering her mother's body and constant questioning by the police had taken their toll. She had dark circles under her eyes and her hands trembled slightly from nervous tension. In the interrogation room, Riley laid out folders with evidence in front of Jessica. Photos of the crime scene, test results, witness statements, everything that had turned her from a grieving daughter into the prime suspect in a murder case. The detective began to methodically lay out the facts. DNA analysis confirmed that the blood in the kitchen belonged to Amelie. The time of death was Monday evening between 7 p.m. and 2 a.m. The murder weapon was a baseball bat from the family basement. There were signs of thorough cleaning in the kitchen, and finally Jessica's hair was found on her mother's body. Jessica's face gradually paled as Riley presented the evidence. When he mentioned the hair, her shoulders slumped as if an invisible weight had become unbearable. Riley explained his reconstruction of events. On Monday evening, Amelie came home from work and told her daughter of her final decision: to sell the house to pay off her debts. She may have finally told the truth about the extent of her financial problems. A conflict ensued between mother and daughter, which neighbors heard around 9 p.m. For Jessica, the news of the house sale was devastating. It wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was her security, her future, her connection to her deceased brother. The prospect of losing the only thing she had as a result of her mother's irresponsibility led to an outburst of rage. At some point during the argument, Jessica grabbed her brother's baseball bat. Perhaps it was lying somewhere on the first floor, or perhaps she went down to the basement specifically to get it. One blow to the back, when Amelie turned away, perhaps intending to walk away from the conflict. Her mother fell, hitting her head on the kitchen floor. Realizing what had happened, Jessica panicked. She checked her mother's pulse, but it was too late. The next few hours were spent trying to cover up the crime. The body had to be hidden, the blood cleaned up, and then an alibi had to be created for her mother's disappearance. Moving the body to the basement required physical effort, but adrenaline and desperation gave Jessica the strength she needed. She thoroughly cleaned the kitchen floor using strong detergents. She left her mother's phone in the bedroom to make it look like Amelie had left home voluntarily. On Tuesday, Jessica went to work as usual, trying to act normal. At lunchtime, she used her mother's PIN code to withdraw money from her account to create activity and divert attention from the house. In the evening, she went to her friend Sarah's house, where she asked questions about the inheritance, not out of greed, but out of fear of the consequences of her actions. Jessica's plan was to wait until someone else found the body, possibly in a few weeks. But with each passing day, the wait became more difficult. The police investigation, the detectives' questions, the need to constantly lie, all of this increased the psychological pressure. In the end, Jessica couldn't take the strain. Going down to the basement on the pretext of looking for documents, she discovered her mother's body and called the police. Perhaps she hoped that the murder would be blamed on creditors or unknown criminals. When Riley finished recounting his version of events, silence fell over the room. Jessica sat motionless, staring at the crime scene photos. Her breathing was shallow, her hands clenched into fists. Finally, she looked up at the detective. There was no anger or denial in her eyes, only exhaustion and something resembling relief. Jessica began to speak in a quiet, monotonous voice. Yes, she had killed her mother. She hadn't planned it. She hadn't wanted to, but it had happened. On Monday evening, Amelie had come home and announced that she had signed a preliminary contract to sell the house. The deal was to take place on Friday, and the buyer had already made a deposit. Amelie explained to her daughter the whole truth about the debts, the threats, and how they had no choice. She planned to find a small apartment where they could live together and start over. But for Jessica, this meant losing everything: her childhood home, stability, plans for the future. The argument started as a normal family conflict, but quickly escalated into something more. Jessica accused her mother of being irresponsible, of ruining their lives with her addiction. Amelie defended herself, saying that she was doing the only thing she could to protect her daughter from creditors. At one point, Amelie said she was tired of her daughter's reproaches and control, that she had a right to her own life and her own mistakes. She turned to go to her room, and at that moment, something snapped in Jessica's head. A baseball bat was lying in the corner of the kitchen. Jessica had brought it up from the basement a few days ago, intending to throw away old things. The blow was impulsive, the result of months of pent-up frustration and fear. She didn't want to kill her mother, but she couldn't stop herself. After her confession, Jessica was arrested on charges of second-degree murder. Considering the circumstances of the case, the lack of premeditation, family and financial problems, and the emotional state of the defendant, the prosecutor agreed to a plea bargain in exchange for a reduced sentence. The trial lasted only 1 day. Jessica pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and received 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. The house on Maple Street was sold to cover Amelie's debts and legal expenses. Detective Riley was present at the sentencing. Looking at Jessica in her orange prison uniform, he had mixed feelings. Justice had been served. The killer had been punished. But there was no sense of victory. It was a tragedy of a family destroyed by financial problems and an inability to communicate openly with each other. Maria Sanchez, Amelie's friend, was devastated by the news that Jessica had killed her mother. She blamed herself for not insisting that Amelie seek professional help for her gambling addiction. Maria moved to another city, unable to live in a place that reminded her of the tragedy. Daryl Harris, a neighbor who was secretly in love with Amelie, sold his house and moved in with his sister in Chicago. He couldn't bear to be near the place where the woman he had feelings for had died, but never had the courage to confess them. Vince Marconi and his partner Joe Coletti were arrested by the police on another charge 2 months after Amelie's murder. It turned out that their business of issuing loans to gamblers was linked to money laundering for organized crime. Both received long prison sentences on federal charges. The house at 1247 Maple Street was bought by a young family with 2 children. They knew nothing about the tragedy that had occurred in the basement, and the real estate agent was not required to disclose this information. The new owners renovated the house, painted the walls in bright colors, and filled the house with children's laughter. But the neighbors remembered. Every time they walked past the house, they remembered Amelie Haynes, a woman who tried to make amends for her mistakes but paid the ultimate price, and Jessica, the daughter who lost everything, including herself, in an attempt to protect her home and her future. The Haynes family's story became a warning to Peoria residents about the importance of seeking help for financial and family problems before they reach the point of no return. Sometimes the price of silence and pride is too high for everyone involved in a family drama.